Hi everyone, welcome to CIS18A Java Programming. My name is Casey Nguyen. I am your professor this semester. I wanted to go over course information, policy, and what you need to do this week. So when you log into Canvas, you will find the first module, Welcome to CIS18A. And I also recommend that you check announcements weekly. I will be posting reminders and possibly internship and opportunities through announcement. But in the first module, you will find necessary resources for the course. If you're new to Canvas, there will be a page for tutorial on how to submit assignments, take quiz, check your grades, etc. The course information will provide information about the course. This course is an online only course. That means that all my lecture and lab will be recorded on videos. I shared the YouTube link on the page for various weeks, so make sure you check the weekly module for lecture and lab videos. I recommend you look over the syllabus, which contain my course policy, grade criteria, assignments policy, etc. So make sure you look over the syllabus to look at the course requirements. The textbook for this course, we will be using an Oracle series-based book, Java, A Beginner's Guide, 8th edition. This is an older edition, but it contains a lot of great resources. And since it's published through Oracle, I wanted to be able to implement this because Java is created or maintained by Oracle. So you can find the textbook information here. Along with the textbook information, I also provided information about JDK. So in this course, you will need Java Development Kit. You are okay using version 11, 12, 13, 14, or 15. 15 is the latest at the time of this recording. I do have instruction for you to install JDK in the lab. And also there's the recorded video release for the lab exercise, how to install JDK. Please watch those so that way you don't get confused. You need to set up environment variables, otherwise your system will not link the program appropriately when you try to run the program. So make sure that you do that. Now, if you choose to use an IDE, a common IDE for Java is Eclipse. I know many professors choose to use Eclipse or NetBeans. I usually just use text editor like Notepad, Notepad++ to write Java program. So I will be using simply a text editor and command line to compile the program once I've written in text editor. So you're welcome to choose any of the IDE of your choice. Now, when you pick the IDE, Integrated Development Environment, you need to take a look at the debugging library, how easy it is to use. Some IDE is a little bit more challenging than others. The IDE needs to be compatible with your systems. So making sure that you select the appropriate IDE is important, or you can just simply use the text editor on your system, on Mac OS, on Windows environment, on Linux, just to write your program, and you can save it as a Java file. So the rest of the assignments, I usually require assignments to be submitted using Microsoft Word, like DocX or PDF. So if you don't have Microsoft Office or Office 365, there's a link for information on how to download. You do have a free account for Office 365, but you have to log in using your school email address, RCCD address. So that way you can download Office 365. So this page is located in the first module of the course. And when you click module, you will find the weekly module following the first. And I also recommend you take a look at the course plan. This is an outline of the 6 weeks that we are covering in this session. It gives you the date and the projected activities that we're going to be doing. And also I include a to-do list for every week module. So you wanted to take a look at the to-do list. I usually also send out announcement as well. But if you're not sure what you need to do or you want to plan out your schedule, you can take a look at the course plan schedule, which gives you a bigger picture on what we're going to be doing in the next 6 weeks. And this is located in the Welcome First module. And for the first week, you will be posting a self-introduction for our discussion, and this is a graded discussion. I will come back to this shortly, but if you have questions in the course and you wanted to post the questions for other people to see, they can answer your question. Other students can access and see that question so they can answer it, or I usually check this and I can answer it. So you can post your questions here, but if you have private questions or immediate questions, you can send a Canvas message or an email. My email is contained in the course information and the syllabus, or you can just use the inbox in Canvas and you will be able to contact me. I usually reply promptly. My policy is I usually reply within the day. So if you have questions or concern, you can post your question here, send an email or Canvas message, or you can stop by my office hours. So where do you find that information? In the course information, you will find my information here. My office hours for the winter semester is Tuesday and Wednesday at 3 to 4 p.m. I will log on to Zoom and I will be there. So if you have questions, if you want me to check out your program, if you have questions about projects, assignments, or any concern, you can see me in Zoom. You will need a passcode, and the passcode is located on this page. This is the course information page in the first module. My email is located here. And also, I will be using Lockdown Browser for final exam, which works with Windows PC, Mac OS, and iPad. It will not work with Chromebooks. So if you have a Chromebook to use for school, you might want to think about borrowing a computer. And Moreno Valley College does have a laptop for loan. So if you want to check out the laptop for tests, for the exam at the end, you can plan on that and make sure you bring your school ID. I have the laptop loan information in the MVC resource page, so you can find that page in here in the first module, so MVC campus resources, and you can click on the laptop loan program. It will give you the information and take you to the page so you can contact them for laptop loan. So for our discussion during the first week, you are to post a self-introduction, and I had posted some general information about myself and some of the favorite things I like to do. So for your discussion, please reply and include the answer to the 5 questions that's been stated in the discussion thread. What is your major? What's your hobby? The skills in programming. Are you beginner? Are you intermediate? Are you advanced in programming? What kind of education goals do you have? What do you want to gain out of this course? And this course is a beginning course, but you will have a lot of hands-on. I normally incorporate business cases so that way you know how to solve some of the simple problems for business. That way you will be prepared for different types of tests or interviews, and also build some of the basic skills to prepare you for your career. I need you to post your main reply by Wednesday, and you need to include 2 additional replies to your classmates' post, and please make it constructive. Don't just put yes, I agree, no, I disagree. Make sure that you reply and give thoughtful feedback to your classmates. And that is due Sunday at the end of the first week. So make sure you check out the self-introduction for the thread in the discussion. And you can also find that on its own module under introduction, post self-introduction here. Next, I'm going to talk about our first week. And this is due at the end of the week. Usually, I normally plan for 2 to 3 tasks. We will have a course project and a final exam that's due at the end of the session, the week 6. So we have to plan that accordingly. I will release the course project halfway through, so you will have time to work on that, and you can look at the criteria then. I will give you a reminder and announcement in about week 3. And if you have questions about the project and things like that, make sure you contact me. For the first week, you will have a to-do list. It lists our objectives for the week, and you can find a lot of the general information, the concept located in the notes. If you have purchased the book, you can read chapter 1. If you haven't purchased the book, you can use the notes that I post and go through the notes. It's going to give you the details that you need for the first couple of chapters. So every week I will have notes posted for you, so you can use that as a study guide. It contains example and explanation, and I will try to incorporate more explanation and programming example in my videos. I have posted some of the lab videos already, so you can check that out. So in the first week, you need to post self-introduction, look at the notes, and you need to complete Unit 1 lab and the Unit 1 assignments. And they're fairly short. I try to keep it, strictly to the programming side. Sometime I will incorporate some questions that relate to concept, and you will find some of those similar questions on the final exam, and I will try to point it out in my lecture video as well. So check out your to-do list. When you click next, you will find the notes located here. You can view it within the page, or you can download it. And the notes contain the important details that you need to go through. Some of the concepts will come up on quiz and final exam. So make sure you check out the notes, and I will go over this shortly. After you see the notes and download the notes, you're welcome to use the file, highlight it, add more details into the file. That's really for you to have. Once I have all the videos linked, I will put it on its page, and you will find each unit video located in the module. In your lab, my instructional videos will be also linked here. And I don't do all the lab exercises because I want you to be able to experience some of those programming challenges for yourself. However, I will do some of the ones that I think that you can gain some of the practice or knowledge and be able to enhance your skills, or I can give you some tips. So I will use those in my videos. So for example, the first part of the lab is for you to install JDK, and I found that a lot of the students have challenges with this, as they don't have it set up properly. So once you install the JDK correctly, everything else will be very smooth. So make sure that you watch the video for installing JDK. And if you want to watch additional tutorial that's not mine, that's I pull these from different tutorials, you are welcome to check these out. I do a lot of my demonstration on Windows PC, as I'm a Windows PC user. But if you have a Mac OS or a Chromebook, you might want to check out other videos on how to run your Java program using terminal in Mac OS, or how to write a program and run the program in Ubuntu, etc. So there are additional tutorials if you're using other operating system that's different than Windows environment. But my videos usually are located at the top of the lab, or you will find it on the videos page. So check out these videos. They're fairly short. You can take a look at that. You can pause and take a look at how to write certain part of the program, and be able to complete the lab accordingly. So as far as the assignment, you will have a short assignment this week. And you can check out the assignments, and I will touch on this later on in this video. I will go over some of the exercises as I found that some of the students that are trying to learn Java, they have some challenges with some of the questions. So I wanted to make sure that I address that in this later on in this video. Now, I require screen captures for your code. You're welcome to send your Java file in a zip folder, but I don't really require that. So when you run your program, after you successfully run your program for assignments in lab, when it says that you need to include a screen capture, please take a screen capture and paste it onto a document. You can submit one document with all the screen captures, and your document needs to be in docx or PDF. I cannot use .pages or other types of file, so make sure that you can upload these so that way I can see them when I'm using the files in the gradebook. So make sure we download the Unit 1 assignments, use your notes to answer some of the questions, and then try to complete the number 6, 7, and 8 as part of the programming. So the next part, I'm going to go over Unit 1 notes, and some of the notes are more lengthy than the others. However, it's designed for you to use this as a study guide. And for many students who don't buy the books, they can mainly use the notes, and that's okay with me too. The books gives you more example. You can have access to some of the source code online, etc. But you are not completely required to get the book. You can simply just use the notes. So in the first part of the notes, it talks about the history of Java and why it's important. As you probably know, Java development is still highly in demand. Java is being used across many different type of devices. The common one that you see is Android systems for tablets and smartphones. So with the Java skills, what you can do is you can apply for jobs that in different areas. And Java is also being used for web, so a lot of web app development, for Android development, and also in electronics. There are thousands of different types of electronics still using Java, embedded system using Java. So Java is essential. And the beginning part talks about how Java came about, and Java really transitioned to something that's, a little bit more functional. But back then, they really wanted to develop a programming language that's going to be working with the net, and it's also going to be cross-platform, it's portable, and it has security. And Java is a little bit different than C or C++. However, it is really structured on C. You will see that there is a lot of similarity in Java compared to C++ or C Sharp. And we will touch on that. So there's some syntax that's going to be similar. And the rules for programming is going to be very close. There's some things that are going to be different. How you use, how main function is used is slightly different. How you display text is slightly different, but the concept is still pretty much the same. So here it talks about the similarity between Java and C or C++. Now, unlike C++, when you write your Java program, you have to start out with a class. So right away, we have to understand how to incorporate class and use multiple classes. So in this week, we're going to start with having one class, and in that class, we will have the main function, and we will just simply have, output and input, and it's pretty simple. However, in the notes, it talks about some of the feature and some of the things that were incorporated in Java that's different than C or C++. So What you probably know or notice in the notes is that there is a thing called applet. And this was used quite a bit. And at the time that this textbook was written, which is a couple years back, Java has, the later Java development kit has really phased out applet. And even with the browser support with Java, you see that with HTML5 and some of the web development enhancement, we don't really see a lot of websites that's requiring user to install plugins for Java anymore. So for the quiz and the test, you need to know what an applet is. And it is a Java program that's transmitted over the internet, and it automatically executes inside Java compatible web browser. And with that, it really pushes the industry at that time to have browser that would support the applet for Java. Because, Java was geared for internet cross-platform programming. So Applet was used to make it compatible and cross-platform and used for the internet. Then later on, it got phased out. While it was dynamic and self-executing, there's a downside of that from the client system is, you have security issues and some of the things that would be required on the client side. They have to have compatible browsers, etc. So with the JDK 11, Applet was phased out. Now compare between Java and C#. You do see that C# is being used for Microsoft programming or Microsoft development. A lot of Microsoft applications, executable programs is built on C#. So if you wanted to write programs that would run on Windows PC, a lot of the times you would see that you were required to learn C# outside of the legacy Visual Basic. So what you've seen is that there is some similarity between C# and some features are parallel between Java and C#. However, there's some differences as well. And for a long time, Java is known for security. The way that we can construct, or the structure of the program, we can control the accessibility from one class to another, how the objects can inherit attributes or access these attributes. So the security was known to be incorporated with Java, and that's why it was very popular for a long time. There's portability with this programming language as well, as it's widely used. Before the higher level programming language, a lot of the programs back then was, using legacy type of programming languages, or on the lower level, even with assembly. And assembly languages really pertain to specific processor. So it, specific language would work with different model of the processor. So having Java or higher programming language that work with multiple processor is convenient. It really pushed development to the next level, and it's compatible with different operating system, different browsers, etc. So this changes the way that we look at programming, transitioning, from the very legacy side to something more advanced. Some of the things that you need to know also is going to be byte code, and byte code is basically, it's a set of instructions that's designed for the Java virtual machine, which uses Java runtime environment. So when you install your JDK, what that will do is that it's going to allow you to be able to compile your program using Java virtual machine which is part of your JER. And the Java virtual machine, all it is the interpreter of your bytecode. So when you write your program, it uses bytecode in order to interpret your program. And so therefore, we need the Java virtual machine. That way we would be able to solve some of the major problems that would be associated when we're dealing with web development. So as you go through the notes, it talks about how this can be used with Sandbox, and how that would be related to the compiler. So important things is that from JDK 9, which is long ago, right? They no longer support JDK 9. We want to use at least 11 and up. What you have is that the byte code is compiled into a native code, which is executed by the JVM rather than on the fly. And because it's the object-oriented language, the entire program needs to be compiled, and then it's going to be able to use the byte code to interpret that. So unlike Python uses interpreter, but it interprets line by line. Java, very close to C++, the entire program needs to be compiled and uses the runtime to be able to give you what is executed. So now the next portion, it talks about Java Servlet, which is on the server side. It's a small program that executes on the server. And so if you wanted to be a developer that's going to work on the back end, you will be experiencing development with the server. And applets rely on the browser plugin, so that has gone away. But Servlet was basically an extension for web server. And you do see this on some of the existing system. As many companies don't move forward, they still use some of the legacy system. So it talks about different features and how they're able to release. So as for me, in the last couple of years since I started teaching Java for Moreno Valley College, I noticed that we have gone through 4 or 5 different versions of JDK. So fairly they maintain and release new Java development kit having additional features. So if you choose to use the newer JDK, please take a look at the documentation and see what's the difference between, version 11 compared to the newer version. Because they might phase out some of the older features and then add in some of the new features. So, and you can find all of that on the Java website, the Oracle website. So some of the benefits for Java, you can find that with the buzzwords here. And as we talked about that, it's dynamic, it's portable, it's secure, and arguably simple. Some students have told me that Java is a little bit harder for them, but if you're able to program in C++, the transition from C++ to Java is very smooth. It's easy. So on page 6, it talks about object-oriented programming, and it is a structured programming. So you will be using object-oriented methods. So we will construct object, and we will utilize that object to be able to access attributes. And that way we can control how our module or our program is going to be. And you can have subprograms, you can make it modular, where you can have different parts of the program to be incorporated into a larger program itself. So some of the things that you need to know would be encapsulation. And Java has 3 main traits: encapsulation, polymorphism, and inheritance. And we will touch on all of these areas throughout this class. Encapsulation is a way that it binds together the code and the data can be manipulated, and making sure that it's going to be safe. And so that way, that's just why it's known to be secure. Okay, so the code of the data is bound together in that it's self-contained as it is created. And the code of the data can be linked in the fashion that the object is created. And you will see this when we start working on packages. And then we would work on multi-classes. And then we would have superclass, subclass, and you would see more on how we can control what will be private, that would be only be accessed in that class for that object, where it would be public, it would be accessed throughout all the classes. So we will talk about the private and the public area of your code. Now, to start right off the bat, we have to define a class. And the class defines the form of the object. It specifies both data and the code that will operate for the data. So with that, the object is instantiated for that class. And we can have a constructor for the object, or we can simply have the object as the instance. So what we have is we can have a variable that belongs to that certain class, and it would not be accessible in other classes, or we can have a variable that will be accessible to other classes. That will be so you can have the data stored into that variable and be able to access in other classes. Now, the code of the data constitute the classes or members. So if I define variables in the class, they become the members of that class. So it could be members variables or instance variables. And you will see this more when we take a look at the code. Now, we would have member methods or just methods. So methods are functions, basically, inside that class. So you can have many functions that belong to one class, and they're called member methods. Or you can just simply have methods that would be accessible in other classes. And so what you have is very similar to what you see with class members variables, member functions in C++. Another thing we need to know for quiz and test is polymorphism. And this allows us to interface and access a general class of actions. And the simple example is here, it talks about how we would use a steering wheel, and the actual steering wheel is the mechanism, but it works the same as your car. Has a manual steering wheel, power steering wheel, rack and pinion steering wheel. So it's just a steering wheel. Now you can operate the steering wheel, you can drive any type of car. So that same principle is carried into programming, which requires stack. And if you learn this in other classes, or may not, a stack is that we can have it first in, and that's going to be last out. So think about how you would stack a set of plates. If you put the first plate in, it's going to be on the bottom. The second plate's going to be on top of it. So as we remove the plates, the one that comes in later is going to get removed first. So if it's first in, it's going to be the last out. So what we have is we would have the stack routines that will work in specific manner. And if you know how to use the stack, you will be able to structure your data and implement this for your program. So we will come back to this, and you will have other programming classes that will talk about stack, how you can set up a stack in your program, and you will be able to push and pop from that stack. Inheritance is a process that an object would acquire properties from another object, very much like in your family. You inherit certain traits from your parents, and your parents inherit certain traits from their parents, who are your grandparents. So we can set it up where we can have one class inherit attributes from other classes or one other class. So you can have multiple parents for a class. So you can have one superclass or multiple superclass with a subclass. Here it gives you an example about apple and fruits. But using inheritance, an object only needs to be defined for those qualities that makes it unique for that class. It inherits the general attributes for the parents. So going back to our example about family, right? Let's say that your parents are both right-handed, and so you inherit that traits from your parents. And so that will be unique to your immediate family. So that quality is carried down to the subclass, to the children, and the attributes is, as being right-handed, is carried from the parents to the child. So inheritance mechanism can be used where we would be able to inherit different attributes across the classes, or we can make it private where we would only be able to access it within one class. And we will work on this more starting next week. So we will come back to this concept and we will put that into application. You would see it more in the programming side. Now, for the Java Development Kit, this book uses JDK 11 as I stated. So when you download, if you want to use the same version, you wanted to look for Java SE 11. However, if you look at the website, you would find that there is version 14, or you can use 12, 13, 14, etc. So you can use 15, which is the latest. Now, they do update JDK 11, so they have newer release that have some of the fix for the bugs that they previously had. So make sure that we take a look at JDK.X. For when you write your program, as I stated earlier, you can simply use Notepad or any form of text editor. We do not use WordPad because WordPad is not just a text editor, right? You create rich text from WordPad, so use Notepad for Windows environment. And I have specific instruction in the lab for this. Now, when after you write it, you have to save it as a .java file. So after we write our program, you simply do file save as, and as it is in Notepad, it's going to want to save it as a .text. So let's say if we wanted to save it on desktop, we can say example1.java. Now, important to remember, and I mentioned this in my lab video, that if you're using the file name needs to be exactly matching with your class name. So as you define the class, you have to use the same name as your file name, and all your Java file needs to be in .java. With command prompt or command line, when you compile your Java file, you would use javac. And what that will do is it will execute the command so that way your program will be compiled. Now, if you're using an IDE, when you click Run Program, right, what that does is it executes this command and it will compile your program. If it has no error, if your program has some form of output, it will show that. Now, after we compile, we wanted to run the program. That's when you issue the Java. So there are two steps in this process. After you write your program, you use command line and you wanted to execute the Java C command. So please see my lab video. After you compile without any error, if you have an error, you have to go back and fix your program. Sometime that could be syntax error. And syntax error simply is that you had mistyped something, you have a missing symbol, or there's something that is incorrect about your program. There's a mistake. And syntax simply is a rule of how you would write your code. So very much like writing an English paper, you have to have it grammatically correct. So at the end of your statement in Java, you have to have specific things there, a semicolon. If you don't have that, it's going to throw an error. Just like in English, at the end of your sentence, you have to have a period. And at the beginning of the sentence, you want to have capitalization. So there's specific rules on how we want to be able to type out our program. And it needs to be in a specific, it needs to follow certain rule, otherwise it would not work. And after we write our program, we would issue the javac command to compile, and to run the program after we compile, we would use the java command. And this works in terminal for Mac OS along with terminal for Linux. Same thing with Windows command prompt. So here it talks about that it is not an integrated IDE development. So if you use command prompt, that means that you are not using an IDE like Eclipse, right, or IntelliJ, etc. So make sure that we also take a look at the compatibility for the IDE before you choose to install. Okay. So without repeating a lot of the stuff from the lab videos, I'm just going to simply talk a little bit about this program. And this is the simple program, an example from the textbook. Here, what we see is we see comments at the top. That slash and asterisk, all that is a comment. It's an annotation for developer. It's a way that we can make notes of our program. A lot of the developers would have some kind of, simple notes at the top stating what that program is about, or a certain section of the program where they can revisit later to fix something, or to make note for other developers to go back and take a look at that section of the code. So this is a block comment, multi-line comment. So that's why you see this. To start slash asterisk is to start the comment, and to close out the comment, we would close that with the asterisk and the slash. And in this program in Java, you have to start with the class. And by practice, we would use the class name. When you define it, you should use capital letter first. So this is why you have the example with the capital E. You don't have to, but by best practice, you should. So we wanted to define a class, and we would simply say class and then the name of that class. So for this, when I save this program, I need to save it as example.java. And after we have the class name, we would have the curly brace. And inside this, we can have different things like variable, functions, etc. Now, for Java, we can have this main function in that class, and that's going to be the class that's going to contain the main function. So public static void main, and as this should give you a hint that it's a main function, string args. So what that would do is this simply begins with the call for main. We're calling for main here. And to output text in Java, we would do a system.out.println, and we would put in our string inside our parameter, which is enclosed in the parentheses or the bracket. and we would close out the class with the curly brace, and we would close out the main also with the curly brace there. So what you have is, if you open a curly brace, make sure that you have the closing curly brace. And as you see, this finished the statement, so it needs to have a semicolon at the end of the statement. And that statement simply issues a command for the instructions for the system to execute certain things. And in this case, we are outputting text. So it should show Java drives the web as the example. And this is what I also covered in Lab 1 as well. So you would see more details on how to save file and run it when you watch the Lab 1 video. So here it talks a little bit more in details about what I just covered, how you should save your file with the same as your class name, same exact. If you have it lowercase and if your class name is an uppercase, it would not work. Okay. And Java is a source file that's officially a compilation unit. It is a text file that contains, among other things, of one or more class definitions. So in your Java program, you have to have at least one class. And that one class can call for main, and it needs to, if you have one class, you have to have a main inside that class. If you have multiple classes, one of the class have to have a main function. So that means that one of the class needs to have public static void main. Otherwise, it would not work. Okay. And here it talks about how you can issue. So once you write your program, save it, you can use Java C. And this talks about comment, how you can use multi-line comment or block comment. And it gives you the breakdown. So Java doesn't, we call main function in C++, but for Java, it is main method. We would refer to that as a method. And a subroutine is called a method. So for the Java execution, it needs to call main. So that means that you need to have the main inside that class. Now here it talks about an access modifier determines how the other parts of the program can reaccess to the members of that class. So the modifier really tells us whether that class is going to be accessible or not. So if you have public access modifier, then that means that it's accessible to other classes. And by default, if you don't state that it's public or private, it's going to revert to public. Now later on, we would experiment with using public or private classes, so you would be able to implement that in your program. Now when you're using static, it allows the main to be called before the object that class is created, and it's necessary because main is called in a JVM before the object is made, so it needs that. So you can use static. This is why you would see it have static in the keyword for public static void main. So what that is main is accessible. This is the access modifier, and this is the static part that we just touched on. Okay. So here it describes what that line really means. And main is a method that's called by Java application for it to begin. Okay. And the string args it simply use the parameter name args. And this is an array of objects for the string. Because string contains, it is a group of characters. So this is why we have to have it encapsulate. It needs to be included in that parameter as treated as an array. and an array is a collection of similar objects. So think of a string is like a string can be a word like hello, and hello would have multiple characters as a group of characters for that specific word. So those characters can be contained inside the array. So it is a collection of similar objects, which could be characters. So when we use for text output, that's going to have the group of objects which are characters. Here is where we output system dot out dot print line. All this is equivalent to cout in C++. It's going to output text or string. So in here, the string is enclosed with the double quotation mark. So whatever you put in here, it's going to output that onto your console, which is in your command line. If you're using command line, or in the IDE, you would see that in the console window as it output the text. So if you put hello world, then it's going to output hello world. Okay, so here it gives you the breakdown of what each part of the program is. Now, as we talked about errors earlier, make sure that you have appropriate symbols. So if you're missing a semicolon or a curly brace or a closing brace in the parameter, it's gonna throw an error. If you're using an IDE, usually it would highlight that for you. It depends on how that IDE is created, but usually most IDE would have that, and it would tell you which line would have the error, and you would go back and fix that by changing it or adding things to it. Okay. Now let's touch on this program a little bit, and also in the lab I touch on this as well. Here at the top we have the block comment. It basically tells us what that program is about. We define a class. Example 2. This is going to be the same as the file name as it's noted here. We have the main method. We declare a variable. So Java is a typed based language. It's strongly typed language. That means that you have to tell it what type of data that you're going to store in that variable. And a variable is a label that we give to a location in memory that's going to store values. It could be numbers, it could be string, which is text, it could be long numbers, it could be decimal numbers. So this particular variable, myvar1, has an int in front of it, and int just means that it's storing integer, whole number. So how you declare your variable, you simply say int and then your variable name. And we wanted to start our variable name with upper or lowercase letter and then follow it with numbers. We don't want to use symbol in the front. There's some symbols that are acceptable, but by practice we wanted to use upper lowercase letter, and then you can follow it by numbers. You don't start that with numbers. And since we finished that statement, we have to have a semicolon there. So we just declare myvar1 here. On the next line, int myvar2, we declare the second variable. It's holding integer, and this is the name of it, myvar2. And you can have as many variables as you wish in your program, as long as it would be appropriately used. So as I tell my Python class, I would touch on the same thing for this class. When you decide to name your variable, think about the objective of your program. Make sure your variable name is meaningful for that process in the program. So if I'm doing a program for a loan calculator, right, my variable names would be related to the processes to calculate loans for customer. Okay, so, and we wanted to make sure that it's easy to read. The reason why that we would have upper and lowercase mixed in is that it's easier for us to see it. You can also use underscore, my space var, or my underscore var 2, but you don't want to start the underscore first because by practice it's just harder to read. There's some exceptions in using symbol for Java, but for variable name, just make sure that it's readable, it's meaningful to your program, and also it starts with upper lowercase letter. So for the final, you will find a questions that would ask you which of the variable names would be appropriate or correct, and you would have to choose the correct one from the choices. Now on the next line here is when we assign a value, since we say that we previously have declared the variable and the variable would hold integer, which is whole number. When we do the assignment, we would use the equal sign and we would say 1024. So here when you give it a number, basically you assign it a value, and that value is going to be stored inside that variable at a memory location in your system. And the next line here, we're going to have it print. It's going to display text. My var1 contains, and it's going to plug in the 1024 here. So the plus sign here, we just simply concatenate. And that means that we would include, right, the value that we have assigned that was stored in my var1. Next, we're going to take my var1 and we're going to divide it by 2. So the slash here simply means division divided by 2, and store the result after the division in my var2. So after we divide, then we have it output text. My var2 contains my var1 divided by 2, which is the next line. It will take the result that was stored in my var2 and plug that number here. Okay, and close out the curly braces to finish out the program. So here is the output, as you look through. So at the end of this course, I expect you to be able to write your program with multiple classes, but be able to also read a program and understand it, a short, simple program at least. And if you wanted to go in details in the later parts of the note, it gives you the breakdown for each of the line, what it means. Now, using operators for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, these are arithmetic operators, meaning that we can use it for simply addition, subtraction, multiplications, or divisions. And you see this quite a bit in a simple program. We can have it to sum up, right, all the values. So in a program, I can have it add all the prices together, or I can have added all the item numbers together. I can have it subtract to find the differences. So if we're looking at comparison between one price and another price, we can also do subtract. We can multiply. So when customer buy 10 items of the same price, we can have it multiply and then loop it. Okay. We can divide. We like maybe finding an average score for a student when the student took 5 tests. So we can use these in our program, and these are just simply your arithmetic operators. So now here it talks about data type. A variable needs to be typed like what we talk about is int. That's going to be for whole number. So if you're trying to put in decimal and you had specified int for that variable, it would not work. You need to use fractional. So with fractional or floating points, it's data type. So would you use float? Float allows you to have decimal values like 199, 100.246. That would be for floating points. okay? Now, if I don't want to use float, I can also use double. And all that is that we would be able to store longer number in that memory location. So I can have a variable name, a variable that would be type double, and I can store decimal in that variable, like double x. X is the name and double is the type. So here it talks a little bit about that, on how you can use double for fractional values. At the end of the notes, it talks about control statements, and control statements is used in programming all the time. If else statements, with looping, we wanted to use that. So the if statements allow us to implement condition. For example, if it rains outside, we would use umbrella. And in the real world scenario, we would use if conditions for a lot of things. To qualify people for home loans or discounts, or to be able to graduate because that person had fulfilled the number of credits, and so forth. Now the if statement, it checks for that condition to be true. For example, if 10 is less than 11, it would display this text, 10 is less than 11. And this is for the condition that it's going to check for. Now, if it's not true, it would not execute the next part. It would not display 10 is less than 11. So if I have 12 here, it would not execute the print line. On the next one here, the example, if 10 is less than 9, system out print line, this won't be displayed. 10 is not less than 9, so it would not execute that print line. So the if statement is always going to check to see if that's true. If it is true, then it's going to follow the execution. The next process is the next statement is going to be executed. The next set of operators is going to be the comparison operator. This we can use for for our control statement to check the condition. Less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, or not equal to, that uses an exclamation point. And we see this in business applications, we see this in games, we see this in all types of scenario. We see this in stock market, we see this in when you check out your items at the store, right? So like for example, if the item is taxable, the system actually checks that, right? Is it food? If it's not food, then it's taxable item. So it has to go through and make sure that it verifies whether the item is food or not. So yes, there is the control statement that's incorporated inside that applications at the checkout system. For the next part, I will go over the for loop. And for loop is one of my favorite loop, because it's easy to use. It's used for iteration for a lot of things, especially when we're using, collection of objects like in an array. It's used for many different things, to sum up, to do a running sum for your prices. So many things that we can use with the for loop. Now, I highlighted this section. It says that if the outcome tests true, the statement executes for the loop continues to iterate. So it would keep on going if it checks for true. So let's take a look at the for loop real quick. I'm going to expand this. So first, we have our class, okay? in Java, we have to have a class. This class is called for demo. We call main. We have a variable called int count. So before you can use it, you have to declare it. Okay, so we declare it here. And then for the for loop, we simply say for count is 0. This is the beginning point. It's going to start at 0. And this is the ending point. It's going to go up to 5. So the for loop have 3 parts: where it starts, where it ends, and how it would iterate. Okay? There are 3 parts: start, stop, and how it iterates. So the count is going to be incrementing by 1. It's going to up it by 1 every single time. Okay? And as it do that, each round it's going to print line, it's going to display text. This is count and the number. So it's going to start at 0, then it's going to go to 1, and it's going to go to 2, as it's going to increment 1 up to 3 to 4, and it's going to stop because it cannot reach 5. It's less than 5 here. So now when it reaches 5, as it's no longer true, that's where it's going to stop. So first it's going to say this is count 0. It plugs in 0. Then it's going to up it with 1. At this point, we're going to increment 1. Count 1, count 2, count 3, count 4. Then it stops because after that, it's no longer true. It's going to be done. After this, it's going to go here and it's going to display done. Okay, it will not show 5. It will not show this is count 5 because at that point it would when it reaches 5, it's no longer true, so it stops. So this part right here allows you to control the loop. How we start, where we end, and how we increment. Okay, how we iterate. Another way that we can increment is to use the double plus sign. So instead of using +1, we can simply say count plus plus. So that just means that it's going to increment by 1. Okay. So that is simply just how a for loop would set up. And a code block simply is enclosed by the curly brace. So between here and here is a code block. So this is the if statement. If W is less than H, V is going to be W times H. And W is going to be 0. So it's assigned 0. This is the end of the code block. So with your control statement, you have to have that block, and it's going to look at the statements. So if it checks true here, because it's an if statement, it's going to go to the next line, the first line of that block, which is the next line following the statement, and then it's going to execute that based on the conditions. Okay. So for our final project, I expect that you know how to implement loops. I expect that you know how to implement if-else statement, and we will have more practice starting next week. And as I mentioned earlier, at the end of each of your statement, just like how we finish out our sentence in English, we need to have a semicolon. So here, this example, it has x is y. So when you have the equal sign, that means is. X is y, semicolon. That's one statement. Y is y plus 1. Another statement. It's going to print out x. This is the space, and y. Okay. So what you see here is it's indicated, right, that each of the statement is finished with a semicolon. And if it's missing, it's going to throw the error. Now, Java here it talks about indentation. Some languages are very specific with indentation. Python is one of them. But with Java, it's a little bit more forgiving in indentation. But by practice, you want to indent one level when you have a code block. When you open your curly braces, you want to indent so that way we would know that that block belongs to the previous statement. So what you have is, if you have a class definition, you open that curly brace, you would indent in to have class member variables, methods, etc. For your class. Once you close out your curly brace, then you would tab back to bring it back to the first level. No more indentation. Okay. So here are some of the keywords. So when we name our variable, stay away from the keywords. All programming language have a set of keywords, and you cannot use those keywords as identifier for variables or arrays or container. If you want to name something, you want to name it outside, not using the keywords. Okay, so here are some of the keywords for Java. And here it touched on how to use identifier, like naming your variable or your array. So you cannot use Java keywords, as I mentioned. You should not use the name of any standard method like println, right? The built-in methods do not use the same name as the built-in methods. It's not gonna like that. So what you have is, you can use underscore. Okay, you can start with an underscore, but not recommended. What you can do is you can use numbers following letters, and you can use upper lowercase letters. And lastly, we touch on Java class libraries. There are built-in class libraries that's containing methods like println, etc. For string handling for input output, as you see with println, and also in networking and in graphics. And there's some support with the standard class for graphical user interface, but we will touch on Swing is older, but we will move forward and talk about packages that you can import to utilize the components for graphical user interface, like making buttons, scroll bar, menu drop down, stuff like that for Java. Okay. And I'm available during my office hours for questions if you want clarification for certain things. I highly recommend looking through the notes. If you have a textbook, please read chapter 1 and 2. And then we will try to go through every single units with videos and notes, and practice with labs and assignments, and completing tasks like discussion. So for this week, please complete the self-introduction, lab 1, and assignment 1. And I will add some short videos regarding the assignment exercises, the programming exercises number 6, 7, and 8 following this video. Thanks again for your time, and if you have any questions, please contact me.